I choose Miss Elara. Zoe's voice, usually the quieter of the two, rang out clear and decisive. Beside her, her twin sister Chloe squeezed her hand, nodding emphatically. Yes, our mother is Miss Elara. Silence fell over the grand hall of the Cavendish Estate, so thick you could hear the ice melting in William's glass. The three gorgeous models, cover faces of prestigious magazines, stood frozen like flawless but soulless statues. The small fingers of the 7-year-old girls were not pointing at the silk gowns or the perfectly practiced smiles, but straight towards the corner of the room. There, Elara Vance, the maid in a simple navy blue uniform, was quietly adjusting a newly delivered orchid. She didn't even realize she had become the center of a drama she never wanted a part in. For William Cavendish, this was not just an innocent choice. This was a rebellion, a blatant rejection of the world he had built for his children, a world of perfection, power, and superficial beauty. In that moment, the billionaire realized the mother selection he had orchestrated hadn't just gone off script. It had just begun a storm that was about to sweep through his entire life. The Sterling mansion stood like a monument to wealth under a bruised autumn sky, its marble corridors gleaming with a cold that no fire could warm. The grand parlor pulsed with tension, its crystal chandeliers casting fractured light over a gathering that felt more like a tribunal than a family affair. William Cavendish stood at the room's heart, his presence commanding yet brittle, a man hollowed by grief yet bound by duty. A strange clause in his late wife's will, twisted by her sister Isabella's relentless machinations, had forced this moment. A mother selection for his 7-year-old twins, Chloe and Zoey. The idea was grotesque, a mockery of the love he'd lost, but defiance risked unraveling the fragile order he clung to. 3 women, Isabella's chosen models, stood before the twins, their silk gowns, crimson, emerald, silver, shimmering like armor. Their smiles were sharp, calculated, each a bid for a place in the Sterling legacy. Chloe and Zoey sat on a velvet settee, their small hands clasped, their faces a study in contrast. Chloe's gaze fierce, unyielding, Zoe's eyes darting, as if seeking escape. The guests, business associates, distant kin, and Isabella's elite circle watched in hushed anticipation, their whispers a venomous hum. Isabella stood to the side, her posture regal, her eyes glinting with a predator's patience, as if she'd already scripted the outcome. William's voice cut through the silence, steady but laced with an edge he couldn't suppress. Chloe, Zoey, choose. The words felt like a betrayal, a violation of the memory that still haunted these halls. He glanced at the models, their elegance a pale imitation of the warmth his daughters had lost. Chloe tightened her grip on Zoe's hand, her jaw set. Zoe's breath hitched, her gaze settling on the corner where Elara Vance, the maid, moved with quiet grace in her navy uniform, tending a fern with care that seemed to anchor the room's chaos. We choose Elara, Zoey whispered, her voice a fragile thread that sliced through the parlor's pretense. Chloe's nod was defiant, her voice ringing clear. She sees Zoe's paintings. She hears my questions. The room froze, the air thickening with shock. A guest glass clinked too loudly, shattering the silence. Isabella's smile twitched, a crack in her carefully crafted mask, her eyes narrowing on Elara like a hawk on prey. William's pulse quickened, his mind scrambling to parse the impossible. Elara, the maid who'd been invisible to him, a shadow in the mansion's rhythm. His daughter's choice was a rebellion, a spark that threatened to ignite a fire he couldn't control. The model's laughter broke the tension, sharp and cruel. A servant? The one in crimson sneered, her lips curling. She scrubs floors, not raises heirs. Elara's hand stilled on the fern, her composure unshaken, but her eyes flickering with something, hurt or perhaps defiance. Isabella stepped forward, her heels clicking like a countdown. This is absurd, she said, her voice smooth but venomous. You think a maid could replace your mother? Her words were a challenge, aimed at William as much as the twins. The guests murmured, their eyes darting between father and daughters, sensing a scandal brewing. Arthur, the old butler, lingered near the doorway, his weathered face unreadable, but his gaze fixed on Elara with quiet approval. William's chest tightened. torn between his daughter's fierce loyalty and the weight of the sterling name. "Explain yourself," he said, his tone sharp but unsteady, betraying the storm within. Chloe stood, her small frame radiating conviction. "Elara knows what Zoe's drawings mean. She listens when I ask why the stars move. She's not like them." She gestured at the models, her voice thick with scorn. Zoey nodded, clutching a sketchbook to her chest, its pages filled with colors only Elara seemed to understand. William's heart twisted, the twins' defiance stirring memories of his late wife's stubborn spirit, a warmth he'd failed to preserve. But Elara? He barely knew her beyond her quiet efficiency, yet her presence now loomed large, her calm a stark contrast to the room's hostility. Was it genuine, or a mask hiding something deeper? A faint creak echoed from the upstairs hall, unnoticed by the guests but prickling William's senses. It was a sound he'd heard in the sleepless nights after his wife's death, a whisper of something watching. He pushed it aside, focusing on the moment. Isabella's voice cut in, saccharine but sharp. "William, surely you won't indulge this childish whim." Her words were a dare, a test of his control. He wanted to end this farce, to restore order, but the twins' unity held him captive. "We'll discuss this later," he said, his tone final, but his eyes lingered on Elara, catching a fleeting shadow in her gaze. Fear, or perhaps a secret. As the guests dispersed, a single magnolia petal fell from the fern Elara had been tending, unnoticed by all but Arthur, who pocketed it with a frown. The choice had been made, and with it, a game far darker than William could imagine had begun. The Sterling Mansion's grand parlor, moments ago a stage for Chloe and Zoe's shocking choice of Elara Vance, now lay shrouded in silence, the weight of their rebellion hanging like a storm cloud. William Cavendish retreated to his study, the heavy oak door slamming with a force that echoed through the marble corridors. The twins' decision to choose Elara, the maid, over Isabella's polished models had fractured his carefully constructed world, and fury burned in his chest, a fire stoked by humiliation and doubt. The magnolia petal Arthur had found, the faint creak from the upstairs hall, both lingered in his mind, unplaceable warnings that gnawed at his control. Was Elara a pawn in a larger game, or was the threat closer, woven into the mansion's very walls? Inside the study, the air was thick with the scent of old books and cedar, the dim lamplight casting jagged shadows across William's desk. He paced, his polished shoes silent on the rug, his mind replaying the parlor's chaos. Zoe's trembling voice, Chloe's defiant nod, Elara's quiet composure in her navy uniform. The choice felt like a betrayal of the Sterling legacy, a public wound to his pride. Yet beneath the anger, a flicker of unease stirred. His daughter's unity, so fierce, so like their mother's spirit, was something he hadn't seen in years. Why Elara? What hold did she have over them? The questions churned, each one a step deeper into a maze of suspicion. Isabella swept in, her heels clicking like a predator's claws, her smile a thin veil over triumph. "William, you can't let this stand," she said, her voice smooth but laced with venom. "A maid? She's played on their grief, wormed her way into their hearts." She leaned against the desk, her pearl earring glinting, a calculated reminder of her influence. "Think of the board, the whispers. This is a scandal waiting to erupt." Her words fed his anger, but they also planted a seed of doubt. Was Elara's quiet care genuine, or a mask for something sinister? William's gaze flicked to the window, where the mansion's grounds lay shrouded in dusk, and he wondered what secrets the shadows held. Downstairs, Elara stood in the kitchen, her hands steady as she polished a silver tray, though her dark eyes betrayed a flicker of strain. The models lingering in the parlor unleashed their scorn. "She's nothing," the one in crimson hissed, her laughter sharp. "A servant playing at mother? Pathetic." The words stung, but Elara had faced worse. She focused on the twins, who had slipped away from their rooms, their small footsteps echoing in the hall. Chloe burst in, her voice fierce. "We meant it, Elara. You're better than them." Zoey, clutching her sketchbook, pressed against Elara's side, her trembling a silent plea. The maid knelt, her navy uniform brushing the floor, and whispered, "I'm here for you." But as she spoke, a faint metallic clink sounded from her pocket, a sound that pricked the air, unnoticed by the twins, but heavy with unspoken meaning. William descended the stairs, his face a mask of control, only to freeze at the sight. Zoe's arms wrapped around Elara, Chloe standing guard like a warrior. The twins' unity pierced him, a reminder of the family he'd failed to hold together. "Elara," he said, his voice low. "A word." He gestured to the parlor, now empty of guests, and closed the door, shutting out the world. "Explain this," he demanded, his tone sharp but unsteady, betraying the storm within. Elara met his gaze, her composure unshaken. "I've done nothing but care for them," she said softly. "They chose me because I listen, because I see them." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that unsettled him, stirring memories of his late wife's warmth. Before he could respond, Chloe burst in, tears streaming down her face. "Don't send her away, Daddy!" Zoey followed, her sketchbook falling to the floor, revealing a drawing of a woman with dark hair, holding two small hands under a sun. The image struck William like a blade, its warmth a stark contrast to his cold suspicion. Isabella, watching from the doorway, her smile tight, interjected, "William, this is childish folly. You can't let it tarnish your name." Her words were a challenge, but the twins' defiance held him captive. His anger faltered, replaced by a raw ache he couldn't name. 3 months, he said, his voice a low growl. "Elara stays as a temporary guardian, under my watch and yours, Isabella. Prove your worth, or you're gone." It was a compromise born of necessity, a way to quell the twins' rebellion without surrendering control. Elara nodded, her hands clasped tightly, a flicker of dread in her eyes. As she left, the metallic clink sounded again, faint but unmistakable, a clue William barely registered but would later haunt him. Isabella's eyes followed her, her smile a thin slash of malice. "You'll regret this," she murmured, too low for William to hear. Arthur, lingering in the hall, caught her words, his weathered face tightening. He slipped upstairs to the corridor where the creak had sounded the night before, finding nothing but a faint scent of magnolia in the air. A flower tied to his late mistress, a warning of trouble stirring. As the mansion settled into an uneasy quiet, William stood alone, staring at the twins drawing on the floor. The sun in Zoe's sketch seemed to pulse with a promise, or a threat, that the choice made tonight was only the beginning of a game far more dangerous than he could fathom. A faint scratch at the study window, too soft to be a branch, sent a chill through him, whispering that the mansion's secrets were only beginning to unfold. The Sterling mansion, once a fortress of untouchable wealth, now thrummed with a quiet menace, its marble halls echoing the uneasy truce forged in William Cavendish's study. The twins' choice of Elara Vance as their guardian had set a spark to the mansion's fragile order, and the air felt heavy with the promise of betrayal. William stood in the shadowed corridor outside his daughter's rooms, the faint scratch at his study window from the previous night replaying in his mind like a warning. The magnolia scent Arthur had noted, the metallic clink from Elara's pocket. These were threads in a tapestry he couldn't yet decipher. Was Elara the anchor his daughters needed, or a pawn in a game he hadn't seen coming? Elara moved through the mansion with practiced grace, her navy uniform a quiet defiance against the scrutiny that followed her. The 3-month trial was a tightrope, and Isabella's presence was a constant threat, her gray eyes tracking every move like a predator circling prey. During a dinner for William's business associates, Isabella struck with calculated cruelty. As Elara poured wine, Isabella's glass tilted, splashing crimson across the maid's uniform, the stains spreading like a wound. "How careless," Isabella purred, her voice loud enough to draw every eye. Whispers rippled through the guests, unfit, scheming, each word a dart aimed at Elara's resolve. She stood frozen, her dark eyes flickering with suppressed pain, but her hands remained steady as she excused herself. The stain a public brand of Isabella's intent. In the twins' playroom, Elara found solace. Chloe, her voice brimming with tales of pirate queens, gestured wildly, her words a torrent of defiance. Zoey sat quietly, her sketchbook open, blending blues and yellows into a sunset that seemed to hold a story. Elara knelt beside her, her voice soft. "What's this one about?" Zoe's shy smile broke through. "It's the sky when Mom sang to us." Elara's heart clenched, but she nodded, guiding Zoe's brush with care. Chloe paused, her gaze softening. "You don't make us forget her. You make her feel close." The words were a balm, but a faint creak from the hallway, too deliberate, too familiar, made Elara's pulse quicken, echoing the sound from the night of the selection. William, watching from the doorway, felt a stir of unease. Elara's warmth with his daughters was undeniable, but the magnolia scent Arthur had reported gnawed at him, a reminder of his late wife's favorite flower. Was it a coincidence or a deliberate taunt? He retreated to his study, the weight of Isabella's accusations clashing with the twins' trust. Isabella cornered him the next morning, her voice low and sharp. "She's playing them, William. A maid doesn't win children's hearts without a motive. Dig into her past." Her words twisted in his mind, feeding a paranoia that kept him awake, staring at the ceiling where a chandelier swayed faintly, as if touched by an unseen hand. Arthur, the old butler, saw through Isabella's game. His weathered hands adjusted a tray as he passed Elara in the kitchen. "They're watching closer than you know," he murmured, his eyes flicking to the ceiling, where the chandelier's sway had stilled. "Stay sharp." Elara nodded, her fingers brushing the pocket where the metallic clink had sounded. A locket, perhaps, or something heavier with secrets. Arthur's warning lingered as she returned to the twins, but her steps faltered when she noticed a guest coat left in the parlor, its pocket bulging with a folded note. Caution won over curiosity, and she left it untouched, unaware that its absence by morning would shift the game. That evening, Elara took Chloe and Zoey to the garden, their laughter chasing fireflies under a darkening sky. Zoey paused, clutching her sketchbook, and whispered, "Is Daddy mad at us for choosing you?" Elara knelt, her navy uniform brushing the grass. "He's trying to understand," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. As they returned inside, Elara caught Isabella's silhouette in an upstairs window, her gaze piercing through the twilight, a silent promise of retribution. The note from the guest coat was gone by dawn, but Arthur found a scrap in the parlor waste bin, scrawled with a single word, "Magnolia." He pocketed it, his face grim, tying it to the petal he'd found, a sign the mansion's secrets were stirring. William, sleepless, stood by his study window, the twins' drawing haunting him. The sun in Zoe's sketch burned in his memory, its warmth clashing with the cold suspicion gripping him. Elara's care was real, but Isabella's words and the cryptic signs, petal, note, creak, whispered of hidden truths. As he locked his study door, a faint rustle sounded from the other side, like paper slipping under the threshold. He opened it, finding nothing but a single magnolia petal on the floor, its edges curled as if touched by fire. His heart pounded, the realization dawning that the trial he'd set for Elara was not just a test of her loyalty, but a descent into a game where the stakes were far higher than he'd imagined. The Sterling Mansion's opulence had become a cage, its marble halls reverberating with the silent menace that followed the fragile truce of Elara Vance's trial. The rustle at William Cavendish's study door, the magnolia-scented note Arthur found, and the faint metallic clink in Elara's pocket lingered like specters, weaving a web of suspicion that tightened with each passing day. William stood in the library, the firelight casting jagged shadows across the shelves, his mind a battlefield of doubt and memory. The twins' fierce loyalty to Elara, their maid, clashed with Isabella's whispered accusations, each word a splinter in his resolve. The mansion felt alive with secrets, its creaks and whispers no longer mere quirks, but warnings of a deeper game. Elara moved through her duties with a quiet grace that belied the storm brewing around her, her navy uniform a shield against Isabella's relentless gaze. The wine stain from the dinner, a public wound, still lingered in her mind, but she buried her hurt beneath her care for Chloe and Zoey. In the twins' playroom, she sat with Zoey, guiding her brush as the girl painted a stormy sea, her small hands trembling with emotion. "It's Mom's ocean," Zoey murmured, her voice barely audible. Elara nodded, her voice soft. "It's beautiful, like her stories." Chloe, sprawled nearby, chimed in. You make everything better, Elara. The words warmed her, but as she smiled, a faint creak echoed from the hallway, a sound too deliberate, too close, stirring the same unease as the night of the selection. Isabella's campaign grew bolder, her malice cloaked in concern. She cornered William in the dining hall, a file clutched in her manicured hands, her smile a thin slash of triumph. "You need to see this," she said, her voice low, dripping with intent. The file revealed Elara's past, a brilliant child psychology student who'd abandoned her studies mid-degree. "She's a fraud," Isabella declared, her eyes glinting, "using her knowledge to manipulate the twins, to worm her way into your family." The words struck William like a blade, feeding the paranoia that had kept him sleepless since the Magnolia note. Was Elara's care a calculated act? The metallic clink, the rustle at his door, were they clues to a deception he'd been too blind to see? William's suspicion drove him to confront Elara in the library, the fire's glow casting her shadow long and wavering. "Tell me the truth," he demanded, his voice sharp but unsteady, betraying the grief that fueled his doubt. Elara met his gaze, her hands clasped tightly, her composure cracking under the weight of accusation. "I left school to care for my dying mother," she said, her voice breaking, tears welling in her dark eyes. "I gave up my dreams to hold her hand until the end. That's all I've ever done. Care for those I love." Her words pierced William, echoing his own loss. The pain of his wife's death, a wound he'd never healed. The raw truth in her voice dismantled his skepticism, but a flicker of doubt remained, stoked by the memory of the note. Magnolia. As Elara left, her footsteps soft against the polished floor, William noticed a glint on the rug, a small locket fallen from her pocket, its clasp broken. He picked it up, his fingers trembling as he opened it to reveal a faded photo of a woman. Not Elara's mother, but someone unfamiliar, her eyes hauntingly familiar. The discovery twisted in his gut, a seed of suspicion that refused to settle. Was Elara hiding more than her past? He slipped the locket into his desk, its weight a silent promise of secrets yet to unravel. Arthur, the old butler, watched from the shadows, his weathered hands adjusting a tray as he passed Elara in the kitchen. "They're digging deeper," he murmured, his eyes flicking to the ceiling where a chandelier swayed faintly, as if touched by an unseen hand. "Guard your heart." Elara nodded, her fingers brushing the empty pocket where her locket had been, a pang of loss tightening her chest. She returned to the twins, but her steps faltered when she noticed a guest coat in the parlor, its pocket now empty, the note Arthur had found, Magnolia, gone from the wastebin. The absence felt like a theft, a violation that whispered of eyes watching her every move. That evening, the twins slipped into the garden, Elara trailing close, their laughter a fragile shield against the mansion's tension. Zoey paused, clutching her sketchbook, and whispered, "Is Daddy mad at you?" Elara knelt, her uniform brushing the grass. "He's searching for answers," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling within. As they returned inside, Isabella's silhouette appeared in an upstairs window, her gaze a blade that cut through the dusk. William, in his study, stared at the locket, its photo a puzzle he couldn't solve. The mansion's silence grew oppressive, broken only by a faint rustle outside his door, like paper sliding across wood. He opened it to find nothing but the empty hall, yet the air felt charged, as if the walls themselves were whispering secrets. The locket, the note, the creak. They were pieces of a game he was only beginning to play, one where trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. The Sterling Mansion's grandeur had become a labyrinth of mistrust, its marble halls echoing the aftershocks of Elara Vance's unveiled past. The locket William Cavendish found, its mysterious photo staring back with haunting familiarity, sat heavy in his desk drawer, a silent accusation beside the lingering echo of the magnolia-scented note and the rustle at his door. Elara's confession, abandoning her studies to care for her dying mother, had pierced his guarded heart, but the seeds of doubt sown by Isabella's venom and the cryptic clues refused to settle. The mansion felt alive with secrets, its creaks no longer mere quirks, but harbingers of a deeper betrayal. William stood in the library, the fire's glow casting jagged shadows, his mind torn between his daughter's fierce loyalty to Elara and the suspicion that she might be hiding more than grief. Elara moved through the mansion with a quiet resilience, her navy uniform a defiant shield against Isabella's relentless scrutiny. The wine stain from the dinner, the whispers of fraud and schemer, lingered like a bruise, but she buried her pain beneath her care for Chloe and Zoey. In the twins' playroom, she sat with Chloe, listening to a story about a fearless knight, her voice a steady anchor for the girl's boundless energy. Zoey, sketching nearby, traced the outline of a lighthouse against a stormy sky. "It's for you," Zoey whispered, her eyes shy but earnest, "because you keep us safe." Elara's heart tightened, but as she smiled, a faint creak sounded from the hallway, a sound too deliberate, too close, echoing the ones that had haunted her since the selection. William, watching from the doorway, felt a pang that cut deeper than doubt. Elara's warmth with his daughters stirred memories of his late wife's love, a warmth he'd failed to preserve. Yet the locket's photo, the magnolia note, and Isabella's accusations gnawed at him, whispering of a game he didn't fully understand. Isabella seized her moment, cornering him in the dining hall as the staff bustled around a breakfast spread. "You're blind, William," she hissed, her voice low, her eyes glinting with triumph. "She's a manipulator, using her sob story to burrow into your family. The board is watching. They'll see weakness." Her words twisted in his mind, feeding a paranoia that had kept him sleepless, the rustle at his door a constant reminder of unseen eyes. Arthur, the old butler, lingered nearby, his weathered hands adjusting a tray, his sharp eyes catching Isabella's venom. He'd seen the magnolia note, the locket's fall, and now he noticed a new detail, a guest key left on the parlor table, its tag marked with a faint floral emblem, a magnolia. "Be wary," he murmured to Elara as she passed, his voice barely audible. "They're closing in." Elara nodded, her fingers brushing her empty pocket where the locket had been, a pang of loss mingling with fear. The warning settled like a stone in her chest, amplifying the mansion's oppressive silence. William's doubt reached a breaking point. Elara's confession had shaken him, her sacrifice mirroring his own loss. But the locket's mystery and Isabella's words held him back. He summoned Elara to the library, the fire's crackle underscoring the tension. "Is there more you haven't told me?" he demanded, his voice sharp but unsteady, the locket burning a hole in his pocket. Elara's eyes glistened, her composure cracking. "I've hidden nothing," she said, her voice raw. "I gave up everything for my mother. I'd do the same for your girls." Her words struck him, a mirror to his own grief, and for a moment he saw not a maid, but a woman who'd faced loss with strength he'd never known. The weight of her truth unraveled his suspicion. In the dining hall, before Isabella's icy glare and the staff's hushed whispers, he made his stand. "Elara is family to my daughters," he declared, his voice steady with conviction. "Her trial ends now. She stays as their caregiver." Isabella's face twisted with suppressed rage, her smile a thin mask. The staff murmured, some in awe, others in shock. Elara stood at the back, her navy uniform a symbol of her quiet defiance, her heart pounding with a fragile hope. As the room cleared, Arthur slipped William a note, a torn scrap with the word Magnolia scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, found in the guest's coat. William's blood ran cold, the locket's photo flashing in his mind. That night in the twins' room, Elara tucked them in, Chloe's chatter fading into sleep, Zoey clutching her lighthouse sketch. Elara's fingers lingered on the drawing, her resolve hardening against the storm she sensed coming. William, alone in his study, opened the locket again, the woman's face stirring a memory he couldn't place. A faint rustle sounded outside his door, followed by a soft thud, a magnolia petal sliding under the wood. His heart raced, the mansion's secrets closing in like a noose. Isabella's silhouette lingered in the hall, unseen, her eyes fixed on the study door, with a promise of retribution. The game had shifted, and the stakes were no longer just Elara's place, but the very heart of the Sterling family. The Sterling mansion's marble halls, once a fortress of wealth, now thrummed with a silent dread. The echoes of William Cavendish's stand for Elara Vance reverberating like a struck chord. His declaration in the dining hall, naming Elara as family, had shattered Isabella's calculated facade. But the locket's haunting photo, the magnolia petal slipped under his study door, and the cryptic note scrawled with magnolia lingered like ghosts, whispering of a game far from over. William stood by his study window, the night's chill seeping through the glass, his mind a tangle of resolve and paranoia. Elara's tearful confession had swayed him, but the mansion's secrets, the rustles, the creaks, kept his trust on a razor's edge. Was he protecting his daughters or inviting a deeper betrayal? Elara moved through the mansion with a quiet defiance, her navy uniform a steadfast armor against Isabella's venomous gaze. The dining hall's victory had bolstered her, but the weight of the locket's loss and Arthur's warnings pressed heavily on her heart. She buried her fear in routine, tending to Chloe and Zoey with a care that felt like a lifeline. In the twins' playroom, she sat with Zoey, whose sketchbook now held a drawing of a ship braving a storm, its sails torn but unyielding. "It's us," Zoey whispered, her eyes earnest. Elara's voice softened. "Strong through any storm." Chloe, sprawled nearby, added, "You make us brave, Elara." The words warmed her, but a faint creak from the hallway, a sound too deliberate, too familiar, sent a shiver through her, echoing the mansion's relentless whispers. Isabella, humiliated by William's stand, struck with a precision that chilled the blood. Using her network of influence, she anonymously tipped off child services, alleging that the twins were in an unstable home under Elara's care, a maid with no qualifications, a manipulator exploiting their grief. The accusation landed like a guillotine, threatening William's custody and shaking him to his core. He found the notice slipped under his study door at dawn, its official seal a stark contrast to the magnolia petal that had preceded it. The words blurred before his eyes: unfit environment, potential removal. His hands trembled, the memory of his late wife's laughter in these halls now drowned by the fear of losing Chloe and Zoey. Isabella's silhouette lingered in his mind, her smile a promise of ruin. Arthur, ever watchful, sensed Isabella's hand. In the kitchen, he passed Elara a tray, his voice a low murmur. "She's playing a dangerous game. Watch the shadows." His eyes flicked to a window where a curtain swayed, as if brushed by an unseen hand. Elara nodded, her fingers tightening on the tray. The absence of her locket a constant ache. She'd noticed a new detail, a guest key left on the hall table, its magnolia-etched tag glinting in the morning light. She left it untouched, but its presence felt like a trap, a thread in the web Isabella was weaving. The mansion's silence grew oppressive, each creak a reminder of eyes watching from unseen corners. William summoned Elara to the library, the fire's crackle underscoring the urgency in his voice. "Child services is coming," he said, his tone raw with fear. "Isabella's behind this. What else are you hiding?" Elara's composure wavered, her eyes glistening. "I've told you everything," she said, her voice steady despite the accusation. "I'd never harm your girls." Her sincerity struck him, but the locket's photo, a woman's face he couldn't place, gnawed at his trust. He paced, the notice clutched in his hand, the weight of losing his daughters a vice around his heart. "We fight this," he said, more to himself than to her. "Together." Arthur's quiet investigation bore fruit. He uncovered a trail of calls from Isabella to a private investigator, linking her to the tip. He slipped William a folded note in the parlor, its contents a list of numbers and dates, a map to Isabella's scheming. "She's not alone," Arthur murmured, his eyes darting to the ceiling where a chandelier swayed faintly, its movement unnatural. William's resolve hardened, but a new clue surfaced. A photograph slipped under his door, showing Elara in a park years ago, speaking to the woman from the locket's photo. The image shook him, a crack in his newfound trust. Was Elara's past truly as she claimed, or was there a shadow she hadn't revealed? That evening, Elara tucked the twins into bed, Chloe's chatter fading into sleep, Zoey clutching her storm-tossed ship drawing. "You won't leave, will you?" Zoey whispered. Elara's heart clenched, but she smiled. "Never." As she left their room, she caught Isabella's silhouette in the hallway, her eyes glinting with malice. The mansion's air grew heavier, the creaks louder, as if the walls themselves were closing in. William, in his study, stared at the photograph. The magnolia note beside it, the word magnolia now a taunt. A faint rustle sounded outside his door, followed by a soft thud. A single magnolia petal, its edges curling like a warning. The game had escalated, and the stakes were no longer just Elara's place, but the very soul of the Sterling family. The Sterling mansion's marble halls, once a stage for whispered threats, now stood silent, holding their breath as the fallout from Isabella's gambit loomed. The child services notice, slipped under William Cavendish's study door like a guillotine, had ignited a fire in him, its threat of losing Chloe and Zoey a wound that bled fear. The locket's haunting photo, the magnolia note, and the petal's ominous curl lingered in his mind, each a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit. Elara Vance's care for his daughters had swayed him, but the photograph, Elara with a mysterious woman, kept his trust on a knife's edge. The mansion's creaks and rustles, once mere quirks, now felt like the pulse of a living threat, watching, waiting. Elara moved through the morning with a quiet resolve, her navy uniform a steadfast armor against the storm. The weight of Isabella's accusation, branding her an unfit manipulator, pressed heavily, but she buried her fear in routine, braiding Chloe's hair, guiding Zoey's brush across a new sketch of a sunlit meadow. "It's where we're safe," Zoey murmured, her voice a fragile hope. Elara's smile hid the knot in her chest, but as she tucked a stray curl behind Zoey's ear, a faint creak sounded from the hallway. A sound too deliberate, too close, echoing the mansion's relentless warnings. The hearing loomed in a sterile courtroom, its fluorescent lights casting a harsh glare over the assembled faces. William stood rigid, his jaw tight, the notice's words burned into his mind. Isabella sat across the room, her smile a thin mask of concern, her eyes glinting with a predator's patience. Her lawyer, a sharp-suited man with a voice like ice, twisted Elara's psychology background into a sinister narrative. "She's a trained manipulator," he declared, holding up documents from her abandoned studies, "using her knowledge to exploit the twins' grief to secure a place in the Sterling fortune." The words struck like blows, each one a calculated attempt to dismantle Elara's bond with the girls. William's fist clenched, his resolve battling the doubt stirred by the locket's photo. Elara sat beside him, her hands clasped tightly, her composure a fragile shield. The lawyer's accusations cut deep, but she held her head high, her navy uniform a quiet defiance. William rose, his voice steady with a conviction born of sleepless nights. "Elara has given my daughters hope where I failed," he said, his words slicing through the room. "Her care isn't manipulation, it's healing." His defense was fierce, but the photograph's mystery gnawed at him, a shadow that threatened to undermine his stand. The judge's eyes narrowed, her pen pausing, as the room waited for the twins' testimony. Chloe and Zoey were ushered in, their small figures dwarfed by the courtroom's severity. Chloe's gaze was fierce, unyielding, her voice cutting through the silence. "Elara doesn't make us forget Mom," she said, her words raw with truth. "She helps us remember her with joy, not tears." Zoey, clutching her sketchbook, trembled but stepped forward, her voice soft but resolute. She opened the book to a vibrant drawing. 4 figures, William, Elara, Chloe, and herself, holding hands under a golden sun, titled My Family. "This is us," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "Elara keeps us together." The sketch's sincerity pierced the room, its colors a stark contrast to the courtroom's coldness. The social worker, moved by the twins' words, turned to the judge. "Their bond with Miss Vance is genuine," she said. "There's no evidence of manipulation." Isabella's smile faltered, her facade cracking as the judge's gavel signaled the case's collapse. The accusation was dismissed, the twins' custody secured, but as William exhaled, a new shadow emerged. In the courtroom's crowd, a man lingered, his face half hidden, his eyes fixed on Elara with an intensity that chilled William's blood. The man's features matched the woman in the locket's photo, a connection he couldn't place but felt like a blade at his throat. As they left the courtroom, Elara's hand brushed Zoey's, her relief tempered by the weight of the man's gaze. William caught her eye, his voice low. "We're not done yet." Arthur, waiting outside, handed William a folded note, his face grim. "Found this in the guest coat," he murmured. The paper bore a single word, Magnolia, scrawled in a hand that matched the previous note. William's heart raced, the locket's photo flashing in his mind. The victory felt hollow, the mansion's secrets pressing closer. That night, Elara tucked the twins into bed, Chloe's chatter fading into sleep, Zoey clutching her meadow sketch. "You won't leave us, right?" Zoey whispered. Elara's voice was steady, hiding her fear. "Never." As she left their room, she caught Isabella's silhouette in the hallway, her eyes glinting with a promise of vengeance. William, in his study, stared at the locket and the new note. The word Magnolia, a taunt that echoed the petal's curl. A faint rustle sounded outside his door, followed by a soft thud. A single magnolia petal, its edges browning like a warning of decay. The hearing had saved his family, but the game had only grown darker, its next move lurking in the shadows of the Sterling Mansion. The Sterling Mansion, its marble halls scarred by the battles of whispered threats and courtroom victories, exhaled a fragile calm in the aftermath of Isabella's defeat. The child services case, dismissed by the twins' heartfelt testimony, had shattered her influence. But the locket's haunting photo, the magnolia notes, and the mysterious man's piercing gaze clung to William Cavendish's mind like shadows that refused to fade. Standing in the garden, the spring air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine, William gripped the torn photograph Arthur had found. A woman from Elara's locket standing beside his late wife, their smiles a frozen secret. The browning magnolia petal, the note scrawled with magnolia. Each was a thread in a tapestry of doubt, whispering that the piece was a facade, the mansion's pulse still thrumming with danger. Elara moved through the morning with a quiet strength, her navy uniform a steady emblem of her place in the twins' lives. The courtroom's triumph had lifted a weight, but the man's gaze in the missing locket gnawed at her, a reminder of secrets she couldn't fully grasp. In the playroom, she sat with Chloe, her laughter a bright counterpoint to the girl's tale of a skybound adventurer. Zoey, sketching nearby, traced a magnolia tree, its blossoms vibrant against a twilight sky. "It's for us," Zoey murmured, her eyes shining with hope. Elara's heart swelled, but as she nodded, a faint creak echoed from the hallway, a sound too deliberate, too close, stirring the same unease that had haunted her since the selection. William, watching from the doorway, felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. Yet the photograph's mystery kept his trust tethered. Isabella's absence left a void, but her final courtroom glare, a promise of vengeance, lingered in his memory. He retreated to his study, the locket and torn photo spread before him, their secrets a puzzle that refused to align. The woman in the photo, her eyes eerily familiar, seemed to watch him, a silent question he couldn't answer. Was Elara tied to his wife's past, or was this another of Isabella's traps? The mansion's silence grew oppressive, each creak a reminder of unseen eyes. Arthur, ever vigilant, slipped into the study, his weathered hands clutching a new clue. A folded letter found in the guest wing, its paper yellowed with age. "This was hidden in a locked drawer," he murmured, his eyes flicking to the ceiling where a chandelier swayed faintly, as if brushed by a ghost. The letter in his late wife's handwriting read, "Trust only those who see the heart." William's breath caught, the words a mirror to Elara's care. Yet the photograph's mystery held him back. He tucked the letter away, its weight a promise of truths yet to surface. Elara kept the twins close, their laughter in the garden a fragile shield against the mansion's tension. Chloe chased fireflies, her giggles echoing, while Zoey paused, clutching her sketchbook. "Will Daddy keep you here forever?" she whispered. Elara knelt, her uniform brushing the grass, her voice steady despite the fear coiling within. "As long as you need me." As they returned inside, she caught a glimpse of a figure at the garden's edge. The man from the courtroom, his face half hidden, watching with an intensity that froze her blood. He vanished into the dusk, leaving only the echo of her racing pulse. That afternoon, William gathered Elara and the twins in the garden, his voice soft but resolute. "We're building something new," he said, gesturing to a magnolia sapling, its buds a nod to his late wife's love. The twins squealed, digging into the earth, their hands dusted with soil. Elara joined them, her fingers steady despite the memory of the browning petal. William's gaze lingered on her, the letter's words warring with the photograph's mystery. The tree's roots took hold, a symbol of renewal, but the air felt charged, as if the mansion itself were holding its breath. That night, Elara tucked the twins into bed, Chloe's chatter fading into sleep, Zoey clutching her magnolia tree sketch. "You're our family," Zoey whispered. Elara's heart clenched, her smile hiding the fear of the man's gaze. In his study, William stared at the locket, photo, and letter, the word magnolia, a taunt that echoed the petal's decay. A faint rustle sounded outside his door, followed by a soft thud. A new note, scrawled in an unfamiliar hand. "The heart hides more than you know." His blood ran cold, the man's face flashing in his mind. The mansion's peace was a fragile veneer, its secrets pulsing beneath the surface, threatening the family they'd fought to forge. As the magnolia sapling stood under the moonlight, its shadow stretched long, whispering that the game was far from over. As the magnolia sapling's shadow stretches across the Sterling Mansion's garden, the fragile peace won by William, Elara, and the twins holds a whispered promise and a lingering threat. The locket's secrets, the magnolia notes, and the unseen eyes in the dusk remind us that some truths remain buried, waiting to surface. What did you feel as the mansion's walls closed in, as trust and betrayal danced in the firelight? Share your thoughts. What moved you? What haunts you? Because your voice is part of this story's echo. Thank you for stepping into the Sterling family's world, for braving its shadows with us. Until the next secret unfolds, we'll be waiting, just beyond the creak of the door.